Hello, my friends. Once again, thank you for joining us on this Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You are at Kardec Radio. This is Spiritism, a closer look. And I'm your host, Luiz Lima. I have a special guest for you tonight. Before we get into that, if you have any comments, any suggestions, any questions, you can always go to kardecradio.com or our Facebook, Spiritism, a closer look page, and just post your comments in there. Tonight, we are going to take a closer look at one of the apostles, one of the disciples. We are going to look at Jesus and Bartholomew. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I think I got just the person who can help us because she's got some very interesting information to bring us about the subject. Here she is, Carol Correa. Carol, how are you?
Good. How are you, Luis?
Good, good. Very glad to have you here to discuss and enlighten us with such an important passage in Jesus' teachings.
Yes, thank goodness we have Humberto de Campos, the Spirit, to thank for that. He has done a wonderful job transcribing real-life accounts of Master Jesus's encounters with the apostles.
Yeah, it's I think the book that you referred to, Boa Nova.
Exactly.
It gives us angles that we wouldn't have in any other way. It's almost like a unique transcript of things.
It truly is, yes. In the foreword of the book, Humberto de Campos tells us that he went to the schools of the gospel in the spiritual realm, and he was able to watch multidimensional videos of Master Jesus's real life experiences. And the book, Good News, is a compilation of 30 of those real life scenarios which he witnessed in an indirect way through the schools of the gospel in the spiritual realm.
Yeah, can you believe this? It gives me chills.
I know, yes. It's such a unique and beautiful blessing for us to have someone who has actually witnessed Master Jesus's footsteps, yes, literally transcribing them to us.
So what does it tells us about Jesus and disciple Bartholomew?
Right. So the chapter from the book Good News that we are going to be referring to tonight is chapter 8, entitled Take Heart. And in this particular account, Humberto de Campos transcribes an encounter between Master Jesus and Bartholomew. Bartholomew, says Humberto de Campos, is or was one of the most loving apostles of Master Jesus's apostolate. And despite the fact that he was very loving, Humberto de Campos does a wonderful job building up his emotional profile to us. And in narrating Bartholomew's inner world to us, Humberto de Campos lets us know that he was downcast, that he was, if we were to put it in modern terms, somewhat depressed, suffering from depression. And his conversation with Master Jesus begins like this: Master, how come someone who knows of the good news like I do, who believes in the good news like I do, cannot experience it unless you are with me? How come? He was saying to Master Jesus, what is wrong with me? Mm-hmm. And how many of us, Luis, between you and I and all of our friends who are here, how many of us may identify with that? How many of us may say, we already know so much, and yet we struggle?
Yeah, I think it's very relatable to the average I would say the average human being. I'm not going to restrict to Spiritism. All of us, all over the world, we all have the same problems and questions, and I think this is one of them. At times, especially with the, events of the last, I would say, 2 or 3 years, with pandemic and war and a lot of other things, it's there's a general tendency of just like, oh my God, right now you just like, oh, I'm not happy about this.
Exactly.
And that's, I think, what exactly is portrayed in the chapter.
Yes, and your body language illustrates it even more for us. Thank you, Luiz, where you said, oh, this is exactly how we depict Bartholomew. And here comes the best part, the part of the dialogue that we are most grateful for, because now we get to hear Master Jesus's approach with Bartholomew. And Master Jesus says, and we quote, Bartholomew, have you heard of good news that does not bring joy? And Bartholomew, like most of us, felt very intrigued by this question. He was saying to himself, how come we never thought about this before? This actually makes sense. Oh, I was caught. What to do now?
Yeah.
And then Master Jesus kindly gives us the key for our own happiness on earth. Because he tells Bartholomew and also all of us, because we are on the same boat, figuratively speaking, Master Jesus tells Bartholomew and us, Bartholomew, all followers of the good news must have 3 particular traits: courage, hope, and joy.
Yeah.
So Bartholomew, like ourselves right now, took this in as we are taking the remedy from the Master in. And Bartholomew questioned Jesus, our Master, even further. He said, okay, Master, I hear you. I understand you, but there was a but. We knew a but was coming. Right?
Yeah.
So he said, but what if our businesses don't go well? How about circumstances when we go bankrupt? How about when there is an economic crisis? How many of us hear about economic downturns left and right? Talk about the inflation, gas prices going up, job security, retirement, part of our conversation every day. And Bartholomew, 2,000 years ago, already brought this issue
The same
up.
thing.
Same thing. Though he didn't talk about gas prices, he was still concerned about his own financial security. And how many of us experience circumstances like this, similar to Bartholomew?
Yeah.
And
One thing. Yeah. Just
go ahead.
to make sure. One thing that's interesting when you mention, he says actually, traces of joy, courage, and hope. He says, but this you got to do this every day in every single thing you do. It's not like I'll do one now and 4 months from now I'll do another 5 minutes of that, and another 2 weeks I'll do another 3 minutes of that. No, it's every day.
Yes, it is. You're right. It's a way of life. It's an inner choice that we make every day as to how to perceive life. This is why Master Jesus was the first and most accomplished positive psychologist on the earth. Because
Absolutely.
he already offered the foundation to it all, teaching
Yeah.
us to seek the good from the get-go. But of course, Bartholomew, as we were saying, wanted to talk about the gas prices, symbolically speaking, and the economic downturn and the financial insecurities. And luckily, thanks to Humberto de Campos through Chico Xavier, we have an answer from the Master. Thank you, Master Jesus. So he comes to us through Bartholomew and he tells us, Bartholomew, what significance Should we place on worldly success when we know that we are on earth to acquire immortal virtues? What is more important, immortal virtues or economic success? And we know that Master Jesus had the moral authority to ask this question because he has already walked the talk. This is why he is our master. So when he asked that with experience, with reassurance, and with his innate moral authority. So, of course, Bartholomew couldn't come up with excuses like saying, "Come on, master, but you don't know my situation." How many times we come up with excuses? Oh,
We do
yeah,
the same thing.
Carol. Oh, yeah, Louis, but you don't know about our situation.
We do the same thing.
And we do the same thing, and then we give people the entire rosary of problems that we
Yeah.
think we have, right?
Yeah.
But with Master Jesus, it wasn't possible to do this because he had the moral authority to speak the truth with kindness. So Bartholomew couldn't refute Master Jesus, but there was another but on Bartholomew's part. Bartholomew then said, "Okay, master, you're right. I hear you." If we were going to put this on modern terms, he said, "Oh yeah, I hear you. But how about when our loved ones depart back to the spiritual realm? Isn't it expected that we experience sadness and grievance when our loved ones discarnate?" Most of us on the earth would say, absolutely, this is a horrifying experience, and so on and so forth. And of course, we are not diminishing how much we miss the physical presence of those whom we love. Of course, that's very valid. But Master Jesus, having walked the talk and with his moral authority, answered to Bartholomew and all of us, "Bartholomew, who on the earth can claim themselves to be an orphan or deprived of love when the Father is watching over each and every one of us, and when we know that the Father's messengers never leave anyone alone? So who could claim sadness when we know that those who depart continue to be alive?" And
Absolutely.
yes, right?
Yeah.
And Bartholomew then had a shift of mind. Imagine he spent most of his life feeling depressed. Then he spends 10 minutes speaking to the Master, and he has such a strong internal shift that when he goes back to his daily life and experiences the same triggers that caused his sadness before, he's now able to find joy. So
Yeah.
Bartholomew goes back to his home, and his brothers, his siblings, bully him, say, "You're not a man, you're not strong enough, you should be stronger, you're always complaining." And before speaking with Master Jesus, he would be depressed. But because he had this encounter with the Master and he took heart,
Yeah.
was able to say, "Well, I understand them. We understand them because they don't know what we do. They don't know Master Jesus. If they knew Master Jesus, they would think differently. So, yeah, let me give them a break." And he
Yes.
went on, revisiting all of his relationships and adding a positive twist to it, seeing
Mm-hmm.
the good in all of them, to the point that the next morning, when he went to meet with Master Jesus, at the time that Master Jesus greeted those who wanted to speak to him, Master Jesus says Humberto de Campos noticed a smile that he had never
Different.
seen before. Yes.
Yeah, it is very interesting because you see when he was going back home after talking to Jesus and throughout the days after,
Mhm.
nothing changed in terms of the city, the places, the birds, the sounds, the lake, the streets. Nothing changed, but for him, everything changed.
Exactly.
So that's obviously it's not a material transformation. The birds didn't change, the streets didn't change, the lake
Even
didn't
his
change.
family didn't change.
Nothing changed. Yeah,
Nothing
the
changed.
attitudes of those loved ones or whoever he had to deal with, nothing changed. What changed
Nothing
was
at
his
all.
perspective on it. He changed
Exactly.
the filter.
He changed the filters like our cell phones here. We
Yeah.
can decide uh, what to focus our lenses on. So
Hmm.
and we can use our filters, as you said, to make the picture lighter, more focused, or darker. The same happens with us internally. And what the big shift that occurred inside of Bartholomew is that he left behind his victimization role.
Hmm.
He stopped his self-pity party in order to find an attitude of gratitude in everything.
Right. And that changed completely his life because once you change your perspective, you live a new life as you if you were born again, almost not physically, of course,
Exactly.
but
Yes, it's
in terms
almost
of
like a
posture.
new reincarnation in the same
Mm,
reincarnation.
yeah, that happened like to Paul and Saul and Paul. Of course, Saul and Paul was a little more dramatic than this, but
Yes,
but the concept is the same. It's along the same lines.
the same,
Mhm.
exactly. The same occurred with Mary of Magdala as well.
Yeah.
She completely transformed herself, and the beauty of allowing the Master to come to dwell in our hearts is that
Yeah.
that opens the possibility for us to change our inner world. And this conversation with the Master allows for us to take responsibility
Yeah.
for how we see our own lives. So we no longer, like Bartholomew, expect others to change.
Right. Yeah.
We no
Yeah.
longer expect the world to be different, but we work on ourselves from the inside out to shift our own take on life. So the responsibility, the locus of responsibility for change is no longer outside of us. It's
Hmm.
rather found inside of us. And this is what is super empowering because as long as we leave the locus of transformation outside of us, it's unattainable because we cannot control what other people say or do. But when we shift the locus of transformation to within, then everything is possible.
And as you said, as we take responsibility for things, we automatically drift away from victimization.
Exactly.
Automatically, it's either or. There are mutually exclusive events. You are either one or the other. So as
Exactly.
we take responsibility and go that route, we automatically abandon the route that leads to victimization. And that's the
Exactly.
beauty of, I think, the part of the teaching. Actually, I don't know if you agree with that, but I think there's a piece of Bartholomew in all
Mhm.
of us.
Oh, I
There's a
absolutely
certain
agree with
amount
that.
of Bartholomew inside of all of us.
Yes, and we all reincarnated to walk the road that he learned to walk with Master Jesus. Yes.
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
beautiful story. It's well, the whole book is very interesting, but this particular one has a I mean, it's the kind of chapter that you need to read 3 or 4 times to
Absolutely.
begin to grasp its meaning. It's
Yes.
very profound, deep, very philosophical.
Yeah.
The way it was written, the way it was put through the words, it's
Yes.
very philosophical. It's one of
Umberto
those
de
things that,
Campos is an
yeah,
artist with words. Yeah.
yeah, it calls for reflection. You know.
Hmm. For sure. And for those of our friends who are here who speak English and are not able to read the original in Portuguese,
Mhm,
all the chapters of this book, Good News, have been published throughout the many issues of the Spiritus magazine,
mhm,
which is available for free either on the website thespiritusmagazine.org or on the app that can be downloaded through the App Store or Google Play. So
mhm.
our friends who beautifully speak English can have access to the very text that we are discussing today as well.
Yeah, I think as the conversation goes along between them, Jesus and Bartholomew,
Mhm.
uh, at least that's the way the books describes. As you go along reading, I think there's a point where he himself, Bartholomew, and the reader,
Mhm.
uh, we understand this is the point of no return. From now on, he can't go back anymore. He can't
Mhm.
be the old Bart, right? He can't be the old Bart. He has to be the new
Yes.
one
Yes.
because it will not make sense. It's a matter of logic almost. It
Yes.
wouldn't make sense to go back to be the old Bart after the conversation, all the things that took place. So
Yes,
there's a point
absolutely.
of no return there in the story.
Yes, absolutely. And we are all reincarnated, we dare to say, to reach that same point of no return where seeking the good and developing an attitude of gratitude becomes more and more natural to us.
Right. And I think things like gratitude is one of them, but other things that were missing in his life. And
Yes,
that's why he was so kind of depressed, not depressed to the point of not being able to do anything, but he was going down that road. He was always
he
sad and
was.
all.
He was.
So it's not just gratitude, it's a lot of things because we know these things, but for us, they are still very fragmented. We can't
Mm-hmm.
sustain.
Mm-hmm.
We know gratitude. At times, we are very grateful for great things or smaller things, and we feel absolutely happy and grand about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the problem is we can't sustain. It's not automated in our perispirit yet.
No, it's
You have
not.
to do a tremendous effort, energy, sweat, you know,
Yes.
blood, sweat, and
Yes.
tears to be
Yes.
able to do that 5 minutes of gratitude.
Effort and repetition is the key. It's
Yeah,
how we develop new habits. It is not going to come automatically because God loves us. God would
exactly.
like for the merit of our conquests,
Hmm.
spiritual virtues to come from us. So rather than spoon feeding us the virtues that we are for certain on the pathway to acquiring, God allows for us to be faced with situations like in the case of Bartholomew that are challenging, so that through sweat, tears, effort, repetition, we are able to awaken the latent light that is in us.
Yeah, and there's a passage in the book that I think on the chapter that I think it's 2 words.
Mm-hmm.
Those 2 words grab me, in such a way. Jesus tells Bart, right? He tells Bart,
Uh-huh.
listen, we meaning all of us except him himself, but
Yeah.
humanity
Mm-hmm.
does a lot of fruitless labor.
Oh,
You
wow.
work and work and work and labor here, labor there, and you don't do anywhere, don't get anything accomplished,
Mm-hmm.
spiritually speaking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's very frustrating. Of course it is. And that will tend to make us go towards victimization. Oh, I've been doing this and I've been doing that, a lot of effort. I do this and things don't come the way, the outcome is not what I expect. So he explains that fruitless labor is the problem. You can do the same labor, but with a different mindset.
Exactly.
You see, Bart did not change any of his actions in terms of activities. He was still a fisherman. He was still doing his work. He was still seeing the same people. He was still walking through the same streets, going by the same lake. But everything was different because, you see, he changed from fruitless labor to productive labor. That
Exactly.
was, I think, the great teaching behind
Exactly.
all of this.
I agree. Yes. And Master Jesus also brought to Bartholomew's attention that the reason we experience so much frustration, unneeded frustration, almost voluntary suffering, is because we choose to prioritize our own will, what we think is good for us. But we
Yeah.
are not used to prioritizing God's will. We are not used to looking at our lives from a higher perspective and
Mhm.
understanding that when we are challenged, it's not because God doesn't love us. It's the opposite. It's because God loves us that we are challenged so that we can come out of our comfort zone and through effort and repetition progress spiritually. For instance, how would Bartholomew Bart learn to be patient, for instance, if he didn't
Mhm.
have challenging relatives? If he had reincarnated in a quote unquote picture perfect family,
Mhm.
he would not have
Yeah,
had so many opportunities to develop understanding and patience.
exactly.
So is it the case that God dislikes him? No, it's the opposite. Because God believes in Bart's divine potential, God grants him the exact context, framework needed for his virtues to sprout like
Yeah.
flowers in a garden.
Yeah, very often what we want is not what we need.
Exactly, and God knows best, of
Yeah.
course. The
So
problem,
he sends us what we need down our
yeah,
way and we complain.
it's pride that doesn't allow us to
Yeah.
see God's beautiful messages of love always.
Yeah.
Right?
Carol, we're approaching the end. Let me just say a few words about our friend Bart, right?
Please.
So he's this righteousness of character. This, guy trying to do everything good, very sweet. When he was dealing with the people, the disciples, the apostles would go out on the field trying to help people. He was this sweet man. And at the end of his life, he got incarcerated, like most all of them, not only the apostles, but Christians in general. So he was
Mhm,
incarcerated. He was supposed to be taken out for execution, and of course, he's in prison, and there are soldiers, watching him and all of them, so they wouldn't flee.
mhm,
So he was in prison, and he would remember on and on and on that one conversation with Jesus, that one conversation with Jesus, and they lived together. They were together for a long time, for 3 years, if you will.
mhm,
But that one conversation in prison, he would, relive that on and on and on and on. And he said, well, I'm at my last leg here. I'm on my last leg. Jesus was also on his last leg on the Last Supper. So
mhm,
this is my last supper here. So I better make good use of it. So he's in this cell, maybe 3 by 3 under whatever conditions, awfully being treated awfully by the soldiers and all of those who are going to execute him. So he starts praying deeply, deeply. And he remembers Jesus, and then he starts feeling his mother in spirit. She had already died, in
mhm,
spirit, approaching him. So he has this clear vision of her by his side. And then the soldiers finally come in and get him out of prison and take him to the place where he was going to be executed. And they start beating him deeply and badly, really bad. And then at one point he sees, so he has his eyes closed. He doesn't want to see blood everywhere. So he has his eyes closed and he sees two hands approaching him. And he looks carefully at the hands. And what does he see? Stigmata. You see
Mm-hmm.
the marks of the cross in the hands.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a vision. He looks up and Jesus lifts him and takes him and says, I came to pick you up. I came to take you. And he takes him. So
You just gave me the chills. That's such a beautiful encounter. The
oh my
master
God.
never leaves us, right, Luis?
Yeah, that's true. So anyway, I think it was a very interesting discussion that we did here. There's a lot to think about. This calls for a lot of reflection on our
Yes.
part and our audience too. If you're following us here, uh, it requires us to stop for a minute, maybe go back to the book and read it again, analyze. There's a lot of information underlined. There's a lot of emotions that
Yes.
are in between lines, and I think we all can benefit a lot from rereading, if you haven't reading for the first time, the story. It's just beautiful. Anything that has to do with Jesus is beautiful anyway. But this one is very touchy. It's very
Yes.
touchy because it's a transformation right before our eyes. I'm going to take
Yes.
responsibility and leave victimization behind. That's it.
You said it all, Luis. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks for being part of the program today, Carol.
Our
It was
pleasure.
great to see
Thank
you.
you. Wonderful to see you and everyone here as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. And you're watching us right now. Don't forget, Spiritism, a closer look. We are here at Kardec Radio every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So be well. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much.